Okay, we are live. Hi, everyone. My name is Blossom. I'm the Artistic Associate for New Native Theater. And today we are having Fern with us for our NC Superpower workshop. So thank you so much for joining us, Fern. This workshop is a long workshop that we've been doing throughout the summer to prepare for our production, our outdoor production of the Unplugging. So I'm going to let Fern take it away.
Ampe tu washte mitakuyapi. Hello, my relatives. Good day. Fern Naomi Renville emakiapie. My name is Fern Naomi Renville. Da Makota. I am Dakota. Sisseton Wahpeton. Mihunkake. Robin Renville. Jan Salazar emakiapi. My parents are Robin Renville and Jan Salazar. And Sisseton, South Dakota, Hemataha. I'm from Sisseton, South Dakota. But right now, Washington State, Edwatia. Yeah, I am now speaking to you from Washington State, thanks to the magic of StreamYard. So thank you for the invitation, Blossom. I know you asked me to speak on nettle tea, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm actually made a jar. It kind of just looks like pee. Sorry. It's a little dilute too because I put ice cubes in it. But this nettle tea that I made earlier today was made from some nettle that was harvested earlier in the season, because right now in August is not the time to harvest nettle anymore for tea. And I don't remember the exact scientific description of why, but I know that as the plant matures and becomes tall and goes to seed, that its mineral content changes, and there's something in it that can become burdensome to your kidneys. So only drink the tea and eat the greens from the spring plant, from the new growth. Once it gets tall, the nettle is good for something else. It's good for a couple different things. One of them is fiber production, and all across the United States, what we call United States now, Indigenous people have created fibers and nets from nettle fibers, including Dakota people. I didn't know that our Dakota people had a weaving tradition that included nettle fibers and bison hair, until I saw in the holdings of the Minnesota History Center some Dakota-made woven bags from the last century. Because we were displaced from Minnesota, we were taken from our woodland setting and placed on the prairie down in South Dakota. So we were separated from our woodland traditions of basket making and weaving. And I didn't know that about my own people until fairly recently. And so nettle is a plant that reminds me of home. It reminds me of the Midwest because it grows everywhere like weed there. And it's so good to eat and make tea from. But it also grows here in the Pacific Northwest very abundantly. In fact, here grows the tallest nettle in the world because of the rain, because of the temperate climate. So that tall nettle, when it goes to seed and it finishes its work for the year, the whole plant starts to dry on the stalk right about now. And so now is the time to harvest those tall stalks for fiber. So this nettle tea, as I said, this was made for me by some young relatives, Elena and Raina. In fact, some fellow Dakota homies. And I'm going to drink some right now because I'm thirsty. Oh, that's so good. So my favorite way to have nettle tea iced. And it's just like any other tea. You take the leaf, you soak it. The longer you soak it, the stronger the tea gets. You can make a strong infusion and then chill it, and then add water to make like an iced tea. And I like to add just a splash of lemonade to sweeten it just a touch. So I don't usually even put honey in. I just like a splash of lemonade. And so nettle tea, when nettle first does come up in the spring, it is filled with incredible nutrients that our body is hungry for. It's one of the earliest greens to come up here in the Pacific Northwest. And it is delicious, and it's filled with things like vitamin K, things like calcium, things like iron that are all very easily absorbed by our bodies, and that we're very, very hungry for at that time of year after a long winter of less fresh foods. So the nettle tea has the power of all that spring growth coming up from the earth. And it's very delicious. And it's also incredibly adaptable as a food. It's like spinach. If you blanch it, it takes the sting away. So I'm going to tell you a story that was taught to me by a Coast Salish storyteller named Roger Fernandez, who's lower Alawasclalam. This is a story that local people tell that explains a relationship with the nettle. And this is how the story goes. A long time ago, on the coast, in a village, all the people lived in fear. In this village, the people were always afraid, always looking over their shoulders, always waiting to run and hide to the places in the wood that they had prepared to hide in. The reason the people were always in fear, always afraid, was because from up the coast would come those war canoes. Those war canoes would come, and they would come down. Those people up north would come, and they'd come down to the coast, and they would come into the villages, and they would take whatever they wanted, including people. Yes, they would take people back to the north and keep them as slaves. And so the people in this village were very afraid. They were living in fear and always worried that those raiders from the north would appear. Well, there was a young woman in this village. She was tired of living in fear. She wished that she could lift the fear from her village. She wished that there was something that she had the power to do. And so that night, as she fell asleep thinking about this, she asked for a vision. She asked for guidance. She prayed for knowledge, for answers, for help. And when she was asleep, the spirit of the nettle plant appeared to her. Yes, the nettle plant. And the nettle plant said to this young woman, "Young woman, go into the woods and gather me. Gather my leaves and make tea from me. And so you must take that tea and drink it. You must drink it. Drink it with your village. And as you drink the tea all together, made from my leaves, and you feel the power go into you, you must say all together in one voice, we will be strong for our ancestors. We will be strong for our people. We will be strong for the ones to come." And then that woman woke up. Now, this might seem like a strange thing to have been given some instructions from a plant, but because Indigenous people know that we are the toddlers of this planet, we literally have shown up so recently. Every other plant relative on this earth all around here They're my elders. They're your elders. They are our elders, our teachers. And so we must turn to our elders and learn from them. This young woman knew that. She knew that. And so she went into the woods and she gathered the nettle leaves and she took them back to her village and built a fire and heated stones. And then in a big watertight basket, she put those leaves and then she filled the basket with water. And yes, the basket can hold water. It's woven that tightly. And then into that basket, the young woman placed those heated stones, and that water boiled, and then it cooled. And those leaves imparted the power of the nettle plant into the water. And when it was cool enough to drink, and when it had steeped, the young woman and all the people from the village who had come and heard the story of the dream, everyone drank some of that tea. Everyone drank the tea together. And as they drank the tea and felt the power of the plant come into their bodies, they said together, all in one voice, "We will be strong for our ancestors. We will be strong for our people. We will be strong for the ones to come." And they were. Oh, yes. Everyone was nourished by that tea. Everyone could feel their courage grow stronger. Well, that wasn't the last that this young woman would hear from the nettle spirit. For the very next night, that nettle spirit reappeared to her and said, "Now, young woman, go into the woods and gather me. Gather my whole stalk covered with leaves. And when you have gathered me, go into the woods with the bravest people in your village. Yes, and when you have all gathered those nettle stalks, take them and flog yourself with them. Yes, as you whip yourself with the nettles and feel my power go into your body, say to yourselves all in one voice, we will be strong for our ancestors. We will be strong for our people. We will be strong for the ones to come." Ouch! And that is exactly what they did. Yes. When the young woman shared this advice from the nettle spirit, not everyone rushed to be a part of it, but there were plenty of brave people in this village. Yes, they weren't all men either. No, of course not, because bravery comes in all forms and genders. And so the bravest of these villagers joined this young woman and went into the woods and found the nettle stalk. And of course, the whole village came along because they were kind of curious. And so that young woman led the group in whipping themselves with those nettles, just as they had been instructed. And as the power of the nettle came into their bodies, ooh, it really stung. They said all together in one voice, "We will be strong for our ancestors. We will be strong for our people. We will be strong for the ones to come." And they were. Now, I don't know if you've ever had an intimate encounter with a nettle plant. They grow in the woods in the semi-shade. They like moist ground. Nettle is covered with hairs. Each one of those tiny hairs at the tip is loaded with a little microscopic drop of formic acid. And when your skin comes into contact with the nettle, it is very painful and it raises a rash almost immediately, a dramatic red, bumpy rash. Now, that's exactly what happened to these people. Yes, they were in some pain and their bodies were covered with red welts of bumps where they had flogged themselves with the nettle plant. And everyone was impressed with their courage. Yes, the whole village felt stronger. Not everyone had done this, but the people said to themselves, "Ah, We are a brave village. We are strong people. And so the whole village felt more powerful. And it's a good thing, too, for you see, not too long after, word came. Word came that from the north, those canoes had been seen, and those people were coming down the coast to make war and take slaves. Well, this time the people did not run and hide. This time the people did not disappear into their hiding places in the woods. This time, everyone in the village went down to the shore. Yes, they went down to the shore and stood shoulder to shoulder on the beach with any weapon they could find. The whole village. And in one voice, the people, they sang and they said, all together in one voice, "We will be strong for our ancestors. We will be strong for our people. We will be strong for the ones to come." Now, out on the water, out on the horizon, those canoes, they could be seen. Now, sound travels so far over the water. When those people all said these words in one loud voice together, that sound rolled over the water and out to those canoes. And the people in the canoes heard these words. They heard this song. And they knew that this was going to be a different experience in this village. They knew that this was not going to be a village that they could come into and take whatever they wanted without any fuss. And they turned around and decided to go find another place that was easier to attack. And they were never seen again in this village. And that is why the people tell the story of how Nettle saved the people. How Nettle saved the people is a story of how the plant spirit advises us when we are needing strength, courage, when we have a lot of fear. But it's also a reminder to take care of our bodies, to make this strong. Nettle feeds us in so many ways. Now, let me tell you another little thing about the nettle plant, and that is that flogging, that painful flogging, it actually is incredibly beneficial. If you have arthritis or bursitis or something like that, and I do, I have something called tennis elbow. I've never played tennis, but I flogged my elbow with the nettle, and it gets this little rash for like 24 hours. I don't touch it. And there's nothing that I've ever experienced that provides such a persistent and complete relief from inflammation and pain for, like, up to 3 or 4 weeks. So it's just, and if you do this habitually, you become accustomed. Your body becomes familiar with the nettle and you become desensitized. So you might not get much or any of a rash, but you'll still get the anti-inflammatory benefit of the nettle flogging. So it's great for old Indian basketball player knees. and it also literally it does. It's such a visceral physical prompt. It gets your attention really fast. And there's also, all sorts of science about how the production of pain actually prompts your body to produce endorphins and natural painkillers. So it is a medicine plant in every sense of the word. Now, I wanted to show you an actual nettle plant because that would be nice, right? Well, I'm going to show you this. This is a bundle of dried nettle. We've got about 6 feet tall that I cut down last week and laid outside to dry. It's just dry, dry, dry. It had already gone to seed, and so it was fairly simple to strip all the leaves and hairs off by running my hands down. And either you have to wear gloves or you can do something else. Let me show you. This is what I usually use to prepare nettle mash. So I take a few leaves of the nettle, I put them in here, and I mash them up. I make this green mush. Make sure you crush it really well, because crushing chemically deactivates the hairs. So once those hairs on the nettle plant have been crushed, it no longer stings you. But even more remarkably, that green mush, you can take it and you can put it on your hands. It'll literally turn them green. And it is a chemical glove that protects your hands, so you can come into contact with the nettle, but it won't sting you. So the remedy for the sting is the sting. It's this interesting thing about this plant. Now, another interesting thing about this plant is that both here and in the Midwest, and I think probably most any place it grows, it does have that early spring growth. It grows really tall, goes to seed, then it becomes a fiber plant. But typically, if you have been harvesting a plant over the summer, or you cut some down now for fiber, if you have rain and cool weather in the fall here, we almost always get a really nice second crop of new fresh nettle. So we have our late summer, end of fall nettle crop too. And last week we had a lovely rain here, and I went out looking and I saw all this new nettle coming up. But now we're in the middle of a nasty heat wave and drought, and there's a bunch of wildfire smoke in the air here today. And I just went out and walked in the woods, and all those little baby nettles are just, they're just wilted down now. So I can't show you one. And that is a climate change impact. And I'm just like processing that like literally right now as I speak, because that's what we talk about when we say Indigenous people will lose access to traditional foods thanks to climate change. If we lose our second harvest of nettle because it doesn't happen in the fall here now because it's too darn hot and dry, that's too bad, huh? So thank goodness I have lots of dry nettle set aside for the year. And thank goodness that next spring is another year, and hopefully we'll have more rain and less insanely high temperatures in the Northwest, where we don't typically. So I do want to show you a little bit about the fiber production. So here's, like I said, here's the nettle, and it is completely dry. Now, if I tried to process this nettle right now while it's dry, and by process I mean separate the pulp from the fiber so that you can use the fiber, it would just crumble. It's really completely dry and brittle. It's really easy to just break it up in my hands. But if I put this in the water and get it wet and soak it for a bit, it is going to become loose and very strong. And then its strength is reconstituted, and I can work to separate the pulp of the plant from the fiber You can actually see a couple of those loose fibers there. See that? Yeah. So the nettle plant, I don't know how well you can see this, but it, see that? It's got 4 segments. It's kind of square. So it's like a hollow tube. And when the plant is growing, it is, of course, that hollow tube is filled with liquid and living green tissue. After the plant has gone to seed and its life cycle is finished and someone has harvested it and dried it, that interior is completely gone and dry now. But this dried pulp on the outside is still there. So must get this wet in order to make a fiber. So there's a little creek here behind me, but I'm just going to do this on my lap. I'm going to turn this down. And this actually makes a great little, it's just like one of those little take your shoes off tray. I'm going to, let's see here. I'm going to shorten this so that it fits. Now, like I said, I didn't understand until fairly recently that Dakota people have a weaving tradition that includes nettles. And when I discovered that we do, and that there are literally objects in the possession of the Minnesota History Center that demonstrate weaving techniques. They're little material objects. And looking at them, I was astonished to see that the weaving technology that goes into that Dakota weaving is exactly the same weaving technology that goes into Northwest weaving. So, of course, weaving is a universal human technology, and it's also a foundational human technology. Now, all around the world, they say that it arose about the same time at different places around the globe. But all around the world, people have learned how to take fibers and twine them into yarn or string or thread, and then to weave those. Now, of course, it was the spiders who taught us to do that. But while I'm talking, I'm going to get this wet and just let it sit here and soak for a minute. So this one's pretty dry. I'm probably going to get all wet. Let me show you. Let's see. A couple little tools that I have that are invaluable for processing nettle. Now, anybody can make nettle fiber and nets. That's the cool thing, is it's a really low-tech and accessible fiber production. Now, nettle is also a dye plant. It makes kind of a, I think it looks kind of muddy black color, but so that's yet another purpose of the nettle plant. I have one of these dish scrapers. These are the things for splitting your stalk open. They're also great for rubbing the hairs off the nettle. And FYI, if you cut a nettle stalk and then just leave it to dry, the itchy hairs are so much easier to take off after it's dry. In fact, many of them will have already fallen off then. Once again, blanching, applying hot water to the nettle takes that sting out of it and makes it safe to eat and drink and touch. So these nettle stalks, every now and then you'll find a little hair that's still on it, but I've rubbed them all off. Now, once again, I want to show you something. This is 50 nettle stalks. Now, one of the things that I think making nets is really good for is teaching math. Teaching math is a collective activity because nets, since time began, nets take a group of people to make. They take a village. I can totally imagine our people hanging out in the winter lodge, listening to stories and making nets, just like the people here. So this nettle plant is a bit of a bridge for me, culturally, geographically. It's a piece of my culture that I find here in the Northwest and in the Midwest. And one of the cool things about those weaving technologies too, is we know, especially Dakota people, we were, I don't even know how to say this, just like not a non-capitalist word, but we were very active on the Mississippi River as traders. Dakota people were known as traders, and people came from all across the country before Europeans came. Of course, Indians traveled around. Of course, we had our own trade, our own tourism, our own education. Of course, we traded technologies and foods and ideas. And so the weaving technologies that are similar are another thing that I appreciate, not as pan-Indianism, but as shared relationships with plants on this continent. So right now, where you live, you may live in a much cooler or wetter place, although I know most of the United States is experiencing drought this year. I know up north by Seattle, there's plenty of nettle coming up in the woods. It's much cooler there by the ocean. There is nettle out there to harvest, and you can find it. Only harvest right now the new leaves that are coming up out of the ground. Don't harvest off the old stalks unless you're harvesting them for fiber. And that's the other thing about nettles for fiber is a lot of people mow them down or cut them at the edge of the parking lot. So there's always, feels like there's always like nettle to I'm going to move this camera back a little, and I'm going to put this down here. And I'm going to show you, I've got a whole bunch of these little rolling pin. So any kind of rolling pin works great. I'm just going to do it in here. I typically would do it on a wood slab or concrete works great. Yeah, this actually, oh, here we go. So once it has softened, you want to flatten it. Sometimes you can just beat it too. In fact, see these, that spot right there where there's, where it comes together and joins? There's like a glue there so that, actually, I'm going to turn this over. Let's see, does that work any better? Oh yeah. You want to flatten. So there's a tube, a hollow tube. Once you flatten it, after you've soaked it, this hasn't quite soaked long enough. Let's just flatten it like this. It starts to come apart on its own. See this? See that? The segments get broken. So spray a little more water. This little doohickey. Those places where it's coming apart there, see that? Our little tube is flattened now. Can use this little thingy to just separate it, just like that. Okay, so see this? These are the two halves of the tube. Now you want to break it down even further. Put a little more water here. And actually, this seems to work the best. So you want to flatten that. And as you flatten that side, you will see it start to come apart even more. See that? So you will have 4 sections. This long stalk breaks up pretty easily into 4 sections when it has been soaked and flattened. There we go. Okay. Water. Get it nice and wet. Now, like I said, if I was doing this while it was dry, it would have just crumbled to pieces. You can't do anything with it when it's dry. But when it's wet, it's powerful and strong again. So once this has been softened a little, you can see that the outside of the stalk now is where the fiber is, and that's flexible. The inside is that dry pulp. It's rigid. The way to separate them, now that they are wet, is you're going to take it over your finger like this. See? And you can literally hear it crack. See that? And when I bend it over my finger, the flexible fiber bends, but this stiff piece of brittle pulp just pops off. Look at that. See how easily it separates? So, and you just keep it wet in those places where they're joined together. You want to break it on both sides very gently. And so that. Okay. This part is weirdly satisfying and addictive to me. I can sit around and process nettle fibers for hours. It's one of my, it's like super relaxing. And also something I feel like my hands already knew how to do this once I learned. That's the cool thing about especially teaching weaving to kids. It's always amazing how there's always somebody in the group of learners whose hands already know how to do it. And it's like you just show them and then they're just take off. So what have we got here? Look at this. It's a fiber. It's a nettle fiber. Now this one's kind of, as you can see, it's kind of in a thick sheet. I could separate it even more into probably 4 really fine pieces. But because I don't want to go on too long here, I want to show you how this nettle fiber is the basis of weaving technology. So in order to turn this fiber into cordage, which is basically string, we want to flatten it. So it's now like a piece of tape. I want to take this piece of tape and make it round. So if you're wearing jeans, that's really good for sorry. So you want to roll it all the same way. You can roll it in your hands. You're taking that long fiber that's shaped like a piece of tape, a flat tape, and you're rounding it by rolling it. It starts the twining process. So once you've done that, let's go ahead and go back and tighten it up. So any fiber that can be made in any plant fiber that you want to cord is really, it's the same technology, the same method. You can make a whole ton of stuff into really cool ropes and strings, like invasive plants like blackberry and ivy. And it's wonderful to expose kids to, because like almost always someone goes, oh, we're making string. Yeah, well, what is string? Where does it come from? It's kind of one of those basic fundamental things. Rope, string, thread, very useful. And a very, very simple technology. Okay, so we've rounded this fiber. Now that it's round, I'm going to get it wet again because we need to make sure that we always keep the fibers wet. Otherwise, they can break. I'm pulling off just a couple more of those little bits. And then let me round that a little better. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to turn this nettle fiber into a piece of string. Now this is a really pretty short piece. This twining, I'm going to show you how I like to do it just because I'm klutzy and I like to use my toes to help me. And one of my students taught me this. It's great for kids. Helps. I think it's like, excuse me, I haven't had a pedicure in a very long time. So let me show you how to use your toes to turn this fiber into a piece of string. So let's see. You can see it here too. There we go. So you've got both of the ends in your two hands. You start close to your toe and you twist the fibers both to the right. I'm twisting them both to the right, and I'm going to go all the way to the end of the fiber and twist them both to the right. So I'm twisting both in the same direction. Go all the way to the end of these fibers. Get it nice and tight. That continues to help round it. So now I'm going to let those ends go and come back down close to my toe. Once again, taking an end in each hand, I twist both fibers to the right, and then I cross over right over left. Both fibers to the right, right over left. To the right, right over left. To the right, right over left. That's all you're doing. It's really simple. After a while, you'll be able to do this in your sleep and talk and all sorts of things. So, oops. Both fibers twist to the right, right over left. And this is how you make string. This is the basis of net making. Now, one of the things I learned about Dakota people too is that not all the bands, but our band, our Sisseton band, is that we ate, because we lived by the Twin Cities, where the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers come together. It's just one huge wetland. Buffalo was like number 9 on the list of proteins that we consumed. We ate lots of turtle and fish. And guess who got the turtle and fish? Often women did. Wasn't exactly warrior food because they're easy to catch with nets, and there's a lot of turtles there. So here we go. I'm going to pull this off my toe now so you can get a close look at string. It's now incredibly strong. I'm pretty sure I could not break it. Now, if I take 2 of these and I twine those together, and then I take 2 more and I twine those together, pretty soon I'll have a rope. That is how rope is made, yes. So this is a pretty thick piece, just for demonstration purposes. But traditionally, this would be so fine. You can make this so fine that you can do really fine handwork with it. I'm not a terribly patient person, so I make the thick kind. I make ropes. But nettle is incredibly strong. It is stronger than nylon if you test its strength. It's an incredibly powerful plant. Now, it's also incredibly long-lasting and durable. One of the things that happened here that was really important for local Native people is something called the Bolt decision. Back in the 70s, a judge named Judge Bolt affirmed Indian treaty rights, establishing the traditional and accustomed fishing places of Coast Salish people. And one of the pieces of evidence considered by Judge Bolt to affirm this were these 400-year-old nettle fishing nets in the mud in these places where Indian folks left them, where they got lost or whatever, for whatever reason, abandoned in the mud. And so they're incredibly long lasting. Now, I am doing some experimenting. One of the things that I'm playing around with a bit on my own is weaving together buffalo hair and nettle, just because it's there's examples, material examples that I can learn from. But I'm also like trying to imagine what are the dye plants that would have gone to produce those red and brown and black colors that for dyeing these hairs and the fibers. So just getting to know this nettle plant has opened up like I have been introduced so like a whole community of plants and ideas just by getting to know this one better. FYI, this is perfect to you can knot it on the end and make it into a little bracelet, or perfect for like an ankle bracelet or wrist bracelet. Oh yeah, if you don't like it, if you weren't happy with your product, just get it wet and take it apart and do it all over again. These nettle fibers, if you keep them wet, they're very strong and forgiving and can be used a few times. So it's a cool, I'm just so infatuated with this nettle relative, and feel like have gotten so much benefit in my hands and my elbows from all the wear and tear from getting old. I'm getting old. Overused my hands. So it's good to know that there's a relative that I can learn from that's going to make me strong. So thank you so much for letting me go on, and much appreciated.
Oh, hi, Fern. That was such a beautiful workshop. I love learning about ice nettle tea and then the story and how it has helped the community, and just learning how like the nettle can become fiber that you can use to create something that you can wear or use, that it becomes so useful. It's amazing. And I love that it helps with arthritis. Like, I'm not that old yet, but I feel like
Yeah.
myself with something. And next summer I'll be ready in the nettle. I'll just run in the field and let it slap my legs.
It's funny. I like to do a workshop with kids where I give them a chance to get flogged on their knees with the nettle. And they always want to do it. And they'll be like, "Ugh." I'm like, "You don't have to." They're like, "No, I want to. Flog me."
It almost feels like a rite of passage.
Have you ever inadvertently encountered nettles?
I haven't. I have not. I mean, I feel like I've only seen it like when we did our last, I think, planting with Brett and Michelle. They showed us
Oh,
Nettle,
yeah,
but I
yeah,
haven't really
yeah.
seen Nettle.
Well, you would remember it if you had. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. You can join us next Thursday again. Maggie Lorenz is going to be leading a workshop for cedar and all things cedar, but I think tea. I don't know, but what's all things? Anything with cedar is amazing. Okay, so join us next week.